All right, just finished up this off-grid power system on this Lance 855S truck camper. Got our old solar panels down there. You can see it has a slide out. This is a really nice truck camper. It's designed as a 4-season camper. Client brought this to me from Cleveland, Ohio to install the power system. And it was a bit of a challenge. There was limited space to work with. You can see our 2 SFK batteries are located under the step. We have a Victron 3 kVA under the sink, and we have our Lynx distribution center down in the compartment below there. There are 2 solar charge controllers on board. One is tucked up under the refrigerator there. That's a 30 amp, and then there's a 15 amp located actually behind the refrigerator, accessed from the vent cover. Got our GX touchscreen integrated into the wall here. There's a bit of a cavity between the wall and the fridge, and there's not much, but it looks great. Now, going into this a little deeper, we have 2 SFK 315 amp hour 12 volt lithium iron phosphate batteries. I've been using these SFK batteries because they integrate very well with the Victron system. So we have a data port that comes right out of the battery, plugs into the USB port of the Cerbo GX. In this case, there are 2 batteries, so we have 2 USB ports that plug right into the Cerbo, with the third one being a power port for the GX touchscreen. In installations where there's 3 or more SFK batteries, you can buy a USB hub that just plugs into one of the ports, and then it gives you additional USB ports to plug the batteries into. But in this case, we didn't have to do that. But what I did have to do to get these batteries to fit in here, I'm not sure if you can see down there, but the original lead acid batteries were recessed into the floor with a plastic tray. These batteries were larger than the lead acid batteries, so I had to cut the floor out just in between the openings, fabricate my own aluminum brackets or hangers. You can see there's one there, there's 2 on each, so that the batteries could drop further into the floor, and that worked quite well. Now, with this being a 4-season camper, there is some insulation in the cavity below the batteries. Note to client or to self, do not drop any screws or bolts in here, because once they're down in there, you have to pull all this stuff out. I guess you could drop the belly pan, so not a huge deal, but don't drop any screws in there. Our batteries are wired in parallel, and they're protected with a Class T fuse here. I use the 300 amp fuse. That main battery cable comes over here to a main on and off switch, which I mounted right on the face. Typically on my installations, you might have seen that I put a BEP 400 amp hour or amp switch right on the positive terminal of my Lynx distribution center, but in this case I didn't have room for that, so I put the switch right there, and I used a 3 5/8 inch hole saw, and it fit perfectly. And that's a nice switch, but it is an expensive switch. It was like $70. Over here, our battery positive comes from that switch to the Lynx distribution center. Now, this is a Lynx power in, it's not a Lynx distributor. I modify this to accept the mega fuses, and it works just fine, and I save myself, $50 or $60. So it's basically 2 bus bars, and we're feeding out our Multiplus, our Orion DCDC charger, our DC load center, and then also our solar charge controllers, which are located there. And the small one is tapped to the end with a inline fuse. The Multiplus, this is the only place I could really fit this thing in here. I don't like that it's directly under a sink drain. The client is a retired plumber, so he is feeling confident that he can fab up something to protect the Multiplus in case that plumbing line does drip over there. Tucked in the back there, that's the original place of the water pump, which I wasn't able to move, and I really didn't need to. Let me see if I can get a light to show you what's up on the wall here. All right, so under the sink, you see there's a DCDC charger, an Orion, and that's going to be a 50 amp DC charger that plugs into the a harness that I'll make that connects to the truck starter battery, and I'll show you the port that I installed on the outside. There's an AC infinity fan that's thermostatically controlled with that little temp sensor right there. And so when it gets 95 degrees in this compartment, and it senses it right there, this thing is going to exhaust. And when this door is closed and when the step is on here, that fan is going to be pulling cold air from, you know, through the vent here and here. This is a cover that I just have off. It's going to pull cold air from maybe the belly pan, and it's going to exhaust out the hot air. These two components are the ones that create the most hot air, the Multiplus and the DC-DC charger. And what I do to power this thing, it's USB powered directly from AC Infinity, and you know, I don't have to alter anything. I buy one of these small DC-DC converters that goes from 12 volt down to, what is it, 5 volts, and then you just plug that thing right in. You can set your fan speed. I have a whole video on YouTube about these fans and connecting them with a system. Check it out, they're really nice. Let's move our little light over here to where our solar charge controller is, tucked up under there. You know, we really don't need to get to this thing. It's connected with a VE direct cable. It has Bluetooth capabilities. We see it on the GX touchscreen. So, you know, it's there, and it's accessible if you need to. Now, when I go to install things like this that are really tucked away, what I do is I connect all of my cables to the unit and give myself, you know, a lot of working length, and then I install the unit, and then I can run my cables. That way I'm not fiddling with, you know, little screw heads and, you know, tightening things in there. I can just do it all outside and then mount it. I did run a couple extra marine cables, you know, typically from a shore power connection on a unit like this. It's Romex, you know, so it's the big rigid orange 10-3 cable, comes right off the shore connector. And there's actually a transfer switch. So if you have a lance and you're doing something like this, you know, I had to fabricate my own little wall here, and you can see it's screwed in from the top, and then I have a bracket down there mounting it to the floor, and it's cut open on the bottom so my cables could feed through. But there is this transfer switch, which I had to relocate. It's that black box back on the wall there, which is going to be, it's going to take a little bit of work to get to that if you ever have to replace it. But I was able to run a new flexible marine tinned copper cable from that transfer switch to the Multiplus, and then from the Multiplus I ran that back into our stock breaker panel. Not much else to say inside here. Let's go outside and see what I did on the roof. And all right, so here is the lower vent for the fridge on the outside. You can see tucked into there we have our 15 amp charge controller. We also have a VE direct cable on that, so you will see it on the GX touchscreen. And then we also have a cable. The cable for the GX touchscreen comes down along the wall there in that space. And then I popped it down the hole, put some black expanding insulation there. And then the input for this guy is right here. So this is called an XT90 port. It's kind of like an SAE port, and it's just something I had laying around the shop. They make an XT60, which is a little smaller, but the XT90s had the 10 gauge. And then I will give them a pigtail that goes from that port to, you know, a solar, typical MC4 solar connector. So he can plug in some deployable or suitcase solar. And right next to this is another cool feature on this truck camper is this these posts to get to the battery. So this is just your positive and your negative, and it runs with some thick cable right here. It looks like a 2 gauge cable. It's, you know, like THHN is what they use, but it's a nice place to connect to your battery if you need to, I don't know, jump start your truck or something like that. Over here we have where our vents were for the lead acid batteries to vent out. I just popped those vents off and put some PVC panels over there and use some silicone to seal them up. And then over here is our DCDC connector. It's an Anderson port with 6 gauge wire, and so I'll go from the starter battery of the truck out of the bed and up and around, and I film, you know, how the camper sits on the truck before they leave, so I kind of know where to put this thing, so when they come back it's just, you know, 2 hours of me fiddling around with putting an Anderson connector on their starter battery. Let's go up top and take a look at the roof. All right, let's go up this really nice ladder, one-handed. Oh. All right, so here we are up on the roof of this truck camper. The roof is pretty sturdy. It's like a styrofoam panel with plywood on the top and bottom, and then it has a rubber membrane over everything. It's got some skylights. I really like the skylights in this truck camper. There's a big skylight that can open up there. You really don't need any lights on during the day. Big Truma 120 volt air conditioner. And then we have 4 of these Renogy N-type Shadowflux solar panels. Each one is 200 watts. So we went from a total of 200 watts to now 800 watts of solar. These 2 are wired in series, these are in series, and then those 2 banks are wired in parallel. That way we could keep the current down and still use the stock solar wiring, which is just 10 gauge wire. Now you can see that these panels are very close, if not touching, this air conditioner. And there's always going to be a shadow on one of these panels unless the sun is directly overhead. And hopefully with these new N-type panels, they are designed in such a way that the shading of part of the panel won't affect the output of the rest of the cells in the panel. Or in this case, because they're wired in series, these 2 panels are kind of acting as one. And so I'm hoping, I'm curious, I guess I should say, to see the output of this solar bank. Right now we're at a pretty low sun angle. The sun is still kind of behind some tree branches over across my shoulder. One is very shaded, and we're getting at like 25 amps of power coming in downstairs. So yeah, I'm pleased with how this turned out. You can see my other projects over there. There's a Winnebago Roam, which is a wheelchair accessible camper. And then we have a shaved ice bus that just came in with actually some burnt wires in it. So I'll be fixing that up for them.